Hi guys, I'm Kat and today I have for you a word in Romanian, a true crime case and makeup. So the word in Romanian for today is, well actually the greeting in Romanian is Bună dimineața. Bună dimineața. Bună dimineața. Well done guys, you just said good morning. Today's case is one of the most heartbreaking cases that I came across and shows really a systematic failure of medical professionals to provide the care and support needed to a person struggling with their mental health. And this could prove a deadly consequence, and in this case it really did. On 28th of July 2022, history was made in the United Kingdom as the public watched a Crown Court judge pass sentence live on TV for the first time in English legal history. Judge Sarah Munro QC sentenced Ben Oliver to life in prison with a minimum term of 10 years and 8 months for killing his grandfather David, 74 years old. Ben himself, a convicted pedophile, discovered her relative had been accused of sexually abusing girls. If you are not familiar with this case, I know. I said it's the most heartbreaking and the failure of professionals, and here I am saying that Ben was only sentenced to 10 years in prison for killing his grandfather.
Something that I was really keen should happen, and I started working on it when I became Lord Chief Justice in 2017. And I think it's an exciting development because it will help the public to understand how and why criminals get the sentences that they do.
So let's get into it so you can get the full picture and then you can reach an informed decision on Ben Oliver. Ben Oliver was born on 26th of February 1997. He lived on Lion Road in Bexley Heath, South London. When he was 23 years old, Ben Oliver knifed and stabbed 74-year-old David Oliver in a brutal attack at David's home in Mottingham, South London on 19th of January 2021. David was immobile and bedbound after suffering a stroke in 2016. Ben was obsessed with his grandmother and believed that her husband had been abusive to her in the past. Ben had his own room in his grandparents' house, but he grew enraged after discovering historic allegations of sexual abuse had been made against David, his grandfather. On the morning of the incident, Ben picked up a knife from the kitchen, walked into his granddad's bedroom and knifed him several times in the head. Ben, who suffers from partial hearing and learning disabilities, immediately confessed what he had done to his grandfather. On 14th of January 2022, Ben pleaded guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. He went through a trial and the jury acquitted him of murder on 25th of May 2022. To fully understand Ben's struggles, we really need to get into Ben's history and his family's history. David Oliver and Susan, Ben's grandparents, got married in 1966. They had a biological son together, and then in 1977 they adopted Ben's mother, Stephanie, when she was 10 years old. Stephanie has a history of severe physical and mental health problems, and she spent much of her adult life in hospital. But in 1996, when she was 20 years old, she got pregnant by James, and Ben was born in 1997. So Stephanie is Ben's mom and James is Ben's dad. Ben was born with a congenital hearing impediment. Sadly, his biological father left his mother shortly after Ben was born. Stephanie then met another man called Steve, and they were in a committed relationship, resulting in them having 2 daughters, Ben's stepsisters. Steve was a horrible partner and a horrible father as well. He was extremely cruel to Ben. He was physically violent, and Ben was subjected to a sexualized environment. At the age of 5, Ben would be introduced to child pornography. Steve would physically and sexually assault Ben. During one of the assaults on Ben by his stepfather, his mom actually recorded the assault, and the police then got involved, resulting in Steve and Stephanie separating. Yes guys, I'm now aware that I forgot to put one earring in. I don't know how that happened, but yeah. There you go. All sorted now. When Ben was 13 years old, he was sexually assaulted by a neighbor. Not only did Ben have a very hard time at home, but at school he wasn't any better either. Because of his deafness, he was severely bullied in school. He was diagnosed fairly early at quite a young age with autism, and he was sent to a school for autistic children, but he didn't really thrive there. When Ben's mother, Stephanie, became involved in a same-sex relationship, his behavior deteriorated even further. He ended up in and out of care, and he became irreparably damaged by his early childhood experiences and also his learning disabilities. Throughout his childhood and adult life, Ben had a very strong and positive relationship with his maternal grandparents. He loved both of them dearly, but he loved his nan the most. His nan loved him as well, and she still does. During his trial, Ben clearly displayed many of the recognized features of the autistic spectrum disorder, and he also lacked the ability to show empathy to others, with the exception of his nan and to some extent his granddad until shortly before his death. When Ben was 15 years old, he sexually abused a very young girl, and in September 2016 he received a 6-year custodial sentence for a number of offenses, including rape and an offense of possession of indecent images of children. Supported by psychiatric evidence, the offending in which Ben was involved was learned from his own childhood experiences, and his lack of empathy or understanding was actually related to his autism. Ben was sent to a youth detention center. Ben had no other convictions, however, he was on license from the custodial sentence when he killed his grandfather. A few days before he was sent into custody in 2016, his grandfather, David, had a stroke which actually left him paralyzed. He was only able to use his right side. He was bedbound and looked after by Ben's grandmother, supported by daily carers. While Ben was serving his sentence for the rape, he was the victim of violence at the hands of other prisoners. Whilst he was in custody, he was prescribed medication for his autism and also for his depression. At the same time, allegations came to light that his grandfather David committed child sex offenses. Both Ben's mother and his uncle expressed a serious desire and formed intent to kill David. They had to be persuaded by Ben's grandmother not to do it. From that time on, Ben's grandmother lost all respect for her husband, who was also cruel to her and had multiple affairs during their marriage. In September 2019, Ben was released on license. He was given a flat to live in Bexley Heath, which was about 7 miles away from where his grandparents lived in Mottingham. Initially, Ben was really proud of the house and he actually did very well. He was managing it until the pandemic hit. He then later found out about the allegations of sexual abuse involving his grandfather, and he told his nan that he could no longer love his grandfather, and he also told his nan that he hated his grandfather. However, at that time he didn't show any violence towards him or express any desire to be violent. But COVID hit Ben really hard. He became obsessed about catching the virus and behaved in extreme ways in order to avoid catching it. He became extremely paranoid about infecting his grandparents, and he avoided contact with them as a result. Because of this, Ben's mental health declined and he became isolated and separated from his grandmother. On Christmas Eve 2020, he went to his nan's house and asked her to help him kill himself by giving him an overdose of tablets. Ben said that he wanted to die in his nan's arms. His nan comforted Ben and managed to get him to change his mind. He then stayed at his grandparents' house for Christmas, but he returned to his flat on the 27th of December. From that date onwards, Ben would speak to his nan on the phone 3 or 4 times every hour. On the 6th of January 2021, he called his nan again with the intent of killing himself. Susan tried again to change his mind, but Ben had already called the RSPCA and asked them to collect his pet ferret from the flat, telling the operator that he was going to end his life. The operator observed that he was speaking really bizarrely and made little sense when he was talking. The call was recorded and played for the jury in the trial. What Ben was telling the operator sounded psychotic, especially him telling the operator that he was looking at child pornography, and he also exposed himself. Ben was taken to hospital, but because of his autism, he didn't really understand that he was expected to stay in the hospital, so instead he took a taxi to his nan's house. His nan wanted Ben to stay with her, but Ben decided to go back to his flat because he was really concerned about his pet ferret. At this point, Ben wasn't in any fit state to be left unsupervised. He should have been in the hospital. His nan and the family all knew that Ben wasn't well, and Susan tried to get him an appointment. On the 14th of January, Ben tried again to kill himself by trying to hang himself, and when he didn't succeed, he tried again by drinking bath water contaminated with bleach. He was taken to A&E, but yet again he was released to the home treatment team. His nan described him on that day as absolutely tormented. The only time Ben would be relaxed was when he could lie next to his nan and hold her arm. His medication was actually increased, and the home treatment team was changed from the team looking after him near his flat to the team near his grandparents' house. From the 15th of January, Ben never left his nan's house again until his arrest for murder. Ben spent his days with his grandmother and continued to talk about demons who were out there to get him. It was around this time that Ben's mother told him that she will not have peace until his grandfather would be dead. This would have been the last straw for Ben because he was already struggling really badly, and now his mom telling him about his grandfather sent Ben over the edge. By then, Ben already knew how unhappy David had made Susan. On the 18th of January, Ben watched a film with his nan about an abused orphan, and he then texted his mother telling her about how that film affected him and how he felt it relates to him. On 19th of January 2021, David's carers came as usual to their house to attend to David's needs. When they left, his nan took him a biscuit and a cup of coffee. That would be the last time that Susan would see David alive. At that time, Ben was restless and he just couldn't relax at all. He asked to lie down next to his nan, and so they did. However, when she got up, Ben went downstairs. This was around 11:30 or 11:45 a.m. That morning, Ben chose a knife from the kitchen and went into his grandfather's room. He then cut his throat repeatedly with severe force. He stabbed his mouth so that he couldn't cry out, and he stabbed his eyes so that he couldn't look at Ben as he was killing him. David actually tried to protect himself by raising his right arm, but of course it was in vain. David was powerless. David had a total of 21 stab wounds to the face, 7 to the torso, and obvious defense injuries. He died very quickly of massive blood loss. After Ben killed his grandfather, he told his nan that he did it and also told her that David can't hurt her anymore. He then texted his own mother, Stephanie, saying he killed his granddad and that he loved her. Susan called 999 and Ben sat with her. At one point, Ben went upstairs and sat on the windowsill. He wanted to jump to his death, but his nan, yet again, managed to convince him to get back inside, and he calmly sat with her until police arrived. Paramedics from the London Ambulance Service rushed to the scene. 74-year-old David Oliver was found suffering from stab wounds. Despite the efforts of emergency services, he was sadly pronounced dead at the scene at 12:25. A purple knife was found resting on his shoulder. At 11:52 a.m., police attended the call to the residential address at West Park. Ben Oliver, then 23 years old, was arrested at the scene on suspicion of murder. Ben was arrested as he smoked a cigarette in his bedroom. He was taken to a South London police station and he remained in custody throughout the court process. The entire time, Ben was cooperative. His nan told police that all of them in the family had wanted to kill David. While in custody before his trial, there were several mental health assessments done which resulted in differences of opinions as to the true nature and extent of Ben's mental illness. The psychiatrist instructed on Ben's behalf for the trial had access to all his records and had greater expertise in determining the true position. The defense experts were correct in their diagnosis of autistic spectrum disorder, depression, and adjustment disorder. Ben's adjustment disorder came as a result of finding out about the allegations of sexual abuse by his grandfather. Now, I came across the autistic spectrum disorder and also the depression before, so I kind of understand what they are. However, I've never heard of adjustment disorder before, so of course Google was my friend yet again. According to the Mayo Clinic, adjustment disorders are stress-related conditions. You experience more stress than you would normally be expected in response to a stressful or unexpected event, and the stress causes significant problems in your relationship at work or at school. Work problems, going away to school, an illness, death of a close family member, or any number of life changes can cause stress. Most of the times people, they do adjust to such changes within a few months. But if you have an adjustment disorder, you continue to have emotional or behavioral reactions that can contribute to feeling anxious or depressed. Adjustment disorders affect how you feel and think about yourself and the world, and may also affect your actions or behavior. Symptoms of adjustment disorders include feeling sad, hopeless, not enjoying things that you used to enjoy, crying frequently, worrying or feeling anxious, having trouble sleeping, a lack of appetite, difficulty focusing, feeling overwhelmed, difficulty functioning in daily activities, withdrawing from social support, avoiding important things such as going to work or paying bills, suicidal thoughts or behavior. Let's not forget that apart from Ben having autistic spectrum disorder and depression, he also has the adjustment disorder, which would only amplify his mental health struggles. The expert witnesses' views were that Ben's diagnosed medical conditions substantially impaired his ability to form a rational judgment. He didn't think there was any alternative to killing his grandfather. He didn't think about the consequences and didn't have the skills to manage conflict or to even see the bigger picture due to his obsession and tunnel vision. However, Ben understood that he was killing his grandfather and he still decided to do it. The judge said that even though Ben is autistic and depressed, he was actually not psychotic when he killed his granddad, and he carried out the killing in a controlled way, making conscious decisions to attack his eyes and mouth, knowing that he was going to kill him and why he was doing it. Because of his past experiences, he didn't have the resilience or the skills to cope with the disclosures of his grandfather actually abusing someone and hurting his grandmother, and so his emotional well-being was affected. That's why Judge Munro, on sentencing Ben Oliver, she took the starting point of 24 years imprisonment. Then she took into account the vulnerability of David, his granddad, of him being bed-bound, the physical suffering that Ben inflicted on him, Ben's previous offending, and the fact that he was on license. Ben's abnormality of mental functioning was accounted for when his sentence was reduced from murder to manslaughter. However, there was considerable additional mitigation in relation to Ben's upbringing, his experiences as a child, and the fact that other members of his family wanted and on 2 occasions set out to kill his grandfather because of unproven allegations made against him. And of a very big significance was Ben's recent discovery that his grandfather hurt his grandmother. Ben also accepted his guilt, and he told the truth about killing his grandfather and the reason why he did it. He also expressed remorse, telling the probation officer, quote, "I've just made the pain greater," end of quote. There was significant evidence that Ben tried on multiple occasions to seek help for his mental health problems, and he was doing well on license. But unfortunately, professionals didn't identify the risk around Ben, and he was sent back into the community. In particular, Ben was placed with his grandparents. A post-mortem examination showed that David Oliver had attempted to defend himself using his one mobile arm, but was in no position to survive the brutal attack. Speaking in Ben's defense, Jennifer Dempsey, Queen's Counsel, told the court that due to his emotional and mental difficulties, the information about his granddad's sexual offenses were almost impossible to process. She said, quote, "Through a series of grossly unfortunate events which we submit combined together to create an almost perfect storm in the middle of which this tragic offense was committed," end of quote. She argued that he had suffered substantial and significant trauma during his childhood and continued, quote, "His life since he was a young child has been characterized by a complete lack of stability and what can only be described as complex family relationship," end of quote. Prosecutor Louis Mabley, Queen's Counsel, told jurors, quote, "He was attacked and killed as he lay helpless in bed in his bedroom on the first floor of the house. He had been repeatedly stabbed and slashed with a knife in the face and in particular in the neck, which had effectively been cut open. It was a brutal attack plainly carried out with the intention of killing him," end of quote. Mr. Mabley said the defendant's case was that he was guilty only of manslaughter on grounds of diminished responsibility and that jurors would have to weigh up his mental state at the time. Giving evidence during the trial, Susan Oliver, Ben's nan, said that on the day of her husband's death, she had approached his bedroom before Oliver came out covered in blood and told her, quote, "Don't go in there, Nan, I don't want you to see that," end of quote. Dr. Cumming, who was one of the professionals to assess Ben Oliver, has provided a report which confirmed that a hospital order is not an option in Ben's case. He described Ben as a very damaged man who will require psychological work in the longer term. On the 27th of July, Judge Munro sentenced Ben Oliver for manslaughter to life in prison, and he will need to serve a minimum of 10 years and 8 months before he is eligible for parole. However, he was given credits for the time that he already spent on remand of 553 days, so he will serve around 9 years in prison before being eligible for parole. And even if he would be released after 9 years, he will be on license for the rest of his life. At the risk of bringing negative comments with this case and also the video coverage that I did now on this case, I will say this: I don't agree with the judge's sentencing. Although in other cases I would certainly say that the sentence was extremely lenient, I honestly don't believe for a minute that Ben should be in prison. I think that really Ben needs to be in a hospital. He needs care, he needs to have care and support. He needs a lot of support for his mental health struggles, and he also needs support to deal with all the trauma that he went through. Yes, I understand that he himself actually abused a young girl, but I have to say that this boy, his whole childhood completely broke him, completely shattered him. Look, after he was born, his dad left him. When he was 5 years old, he was exposed to child pornography. He was only 5, he was just a baby, and he was exposed to child pornography. Imagine what that will do to you as a baby, as a child. He believed that this was actually something normal. He was then abused by his stepfather and then physically abused by him. He witnessed violence in the home. Later on, when he was 13 years old, he was abused by a neighbor, autistic and with a hearing impediment as well. He suffered extreme abuse when he went to school. He then went to a youth detention center after raping a girl. By that point, he was already a teenager who had absolutely no idea what a normal childhood was like. On top of everything, he suffered violence from other prisoners. He then gets out and he finds out that his grandfather sexually abused a young girl, and he was also abused with his grandmother and had many affairs. Not only was Ben sexually abused himself twice at least, and then went on to sexually abuse a girl, but he now finds out that his grandfather sexually abused a young girl. He was struggling in his childhood to deal with what happened to him, only to find out that his own grandparent sexually abused someone. On top of everything, the pandemic hit. The comfort that he would have from his nan, he lost that. He was completely isolated from the world. He became paranoid. He just couldn't deal with it. How many times he tried to take his own life, and how many times he needed help and he didn't get it. Yes, I get that he knew what he was doing when he killed his granddad, and I'm not looking to justify his actions, but what I am saying is that he wasn't in a right state of mind and he never got the help that he desperately needed. And I'm scared that in a prison he won't get the help that he needs, and he might just succeed in ending his life. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. Please do let me know what do you think about Ben in the comment section down below. Do you think that his place is in a prison, or do you think that he would rather benefit from being in a hospital where he could get treatment for all his trauma to learn how to deal with it? Please do let me know in the comment section down below. Before I end this video, if you are interested in any of the products that I used to do my makeup today, all the links for the products will be in the description down below. They are always there. Thanks again for watching. Take care, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!